as the sun went down in Burbank on a warm spring night. The Tonight Show stage lights shone like a second sun. The technicians moved with practiced accuracy. Hands on stage mumbled into headsets. The musicians in the band tuned their gear. On the sidewalk outside, a long line of excited fans waited to catch a glimpse of a celebrity. Ace Frehley was the guest that night, and Johnny Carson was sitting at the desk, calmly going over his cards. Johnny had talked to famous people, presidents, stars, astronauts, and more. He was very good at time. He could guess a joke before it was said. People around him could tell when they were about to laugh. But that night, there was something in the air that it's heavier than normal. It wasn't dramatic or clear. It was just different. Elvis was alone in his changing room backstage. Instead of a sparkly costume, he wore a dark, sharp suit. It was easy to understand and not too loud. A stylist put makeup on his face with a cotton swab to try to hide the tired look around his eyes. Elvis was nice and thanked her. His voice wasn't as loud as it used to be. He took a long time to look at himself in the mirror. He didn't see the rock and roll king. He didn't see the yelling, Parks or the gold records. A man who had been running for a long time caught his eye. Conversations among his friends and family were quiet outside the door. They knew how to keep him safe from crowds, questions, and stories. But tonight, they couldn't keep him safe from something. Weakness. It's not just tiredness. The kind that stays in your heart. Elvis took his time standing. He moved slowly, like he knew every joint in his body. He made changes to his collar. He took a deep breath once and twice. "Are you ready, sir?" someone asked in a soft way. Elvis gave a nod. Johnny finished his speech on stage. People in the room laughed at his last line. The band played a fun sting. "And now," Johnny said with a smile, "we have a very special guest tonight." People started to applaud before he was done with his introduction. "This is Elvis Presley, friends and family." The curtain came apart. Elvis left. The crowd erupted in cheers. People stood up. Some people cried. Some people shook their heads. It wasn't just cheers. It was Thanksgiving. It was a thought. There were decades worth of songs coming out in sound. John stood up to say hello. It was at that moment that he saw it. Not the extra weight, the slower walk, or even the eyes that are tired. The pause was what it was. There was only a half-second pause before Elvis came out into the light. The two of them shook hands. The grip was soft, warmer than imagined, and a little unsteady. John said, "It's great to see you again." Elvis said, "It's good to be here." He did smile, but it looked like he had practiced it. They sat down. The crowd slowly became quiet. Johnny asked some simple questions to start. Music, trips, and stories from Memphis. Elvis always answered nicely, and sometimes he was even charming. He told a short story about leaving work late to record. People in the crowd laughed, but Johnny paid close attention. Elvis blinks a lot more than normal. He often cleared his throat. He put his hands on his knees and lightly curled his fingers together. "It's been 8 minutes." Johnny leaned back in a casual way. "What about acting still gets you excited after all the years you've put in?" It was a good question. A well-known one. Elvis took a deep breath. His hands moved a little. John saw it after that. A shaking, not big or showy, but true to life. Elvis put one hand on top of the other to make it seem calmer. He opened his mouth to answer, but at first he couldn't say anything. People in the crowd waited. He took a breath. "You know, when I first started," Elvis said slowly, "feel free to sing, that was it. Just sing." It seemed like his voice was softer than in other conversations. "I didn't think about being well known." Elvis Presley didn't think about being healthy. A few people laughed out loud, but Elvis didn't smile. This is what he said next. "It became bigger than me, bigger than the music." Johnny leaned forward a little and didn't say anything. Elvis said, "And when something gets bigger than you, every day you try to live up to it. You try not to let it down." The room was very quiet now. Johnny was careful about what he said. Is that tough? He saw Elvis, and in that look, something that wasn't being watched flickered. He agreed that it could be. Not over the top or passionate. Just honest. He changed his cuff. Elvis went on, "I think people forget that the fellow singing is still just a fellow." There was a soft wave of understanding through the crowd. Johnny gave a soft nod. "It's likely that many people don't think about that." Elvis smiled a little. "It's okay. It's just the way things are." But Johnny could hear what was below. Not complaining or being angry, but being worn out. "Wait a minute." They went to the mall. The sign for applause lit up. The band played. While the cameras were off, Johnny made a small move toward Elvis. He asked in a quiet voice, "Are you okay?" Elvis gave a nod. "I'm just tired. Johnny has been on a long trip." Joey didn't press. The energy changed again when they came back live. Johnny talked about fun things like movies, favorite songs, and memories from his youth. When Elvis talked about his mother, he got a little happier. When you said Lisa Murray, his eyes got softer. For a moment, the crowd saw warmth that had nothing to do with fame, but the tiredness stayed. Johnny asked, "Would you mind singing something for us?" Near the end, the crowd cheered. Quickly, Elvis was a little unsure. He then stood up. It was a slow start for the band. Elvis sang with his eyes closed. It wasn't as strong as it used to be, but his speech now had more depth to it. Longing, experience, and being fragile. Every note sounded like it was meant to be there. This time, people in the crowd didn't scream. It was heard. There was kindness in the room that had nothing to do with the famous people there. It was a person. As soon as he was done, the clapping started out soft and then got loud. Not crazy or crazy making. Being polite. When Elvis went back to his place, he was breathing more heavily than before. Johnny looked at him with more than just respect for his work. In his mind, he saw a man carrying something heavy. When the show was over, Johnny said thank you. Elvis stood up again, gave a small wave, and left the stage. The screen went away. The crowd was filled with feeling. Behind the scenes, Elvis slowly took off his jacket. He sat there by himself for a moment and looked at the mirror in the dressing room one more time. There were still faint sounds of praise in the hallway, but it was quiet inside. It's very quiet. A short time later, Johnny walked through the opening. "Thank you for tonight," he truly said. Elvis gave a small smile. John stopped and said, "Thank you for letting me just be me," he said. "That's always okay here." Elvis gave a nod. That was clear to him. But being yourself was hard some days. That night wouldn't be in the news. There was no scandal, fall, or explosive statement. There was just a man who looked tired and a host who paid attention. When the world learned that Elvis had died months later at age 42, many people went back to that conversation. Some would look into it. Some people would guess, but Johnny remembered something much easier. He could remember the break before the curtain. He thought back to the shaking in his hand. In his mind, Elvis had said, "The fellow singing is still just a fellow." Also, he felt something he had always known but never really understand. There is a person behind every story, every spotlight, and every roar of praise. A person can be very brave sometimes if they sit under the lights and tell the truth. When the applause stopped and the red recording light above Johnny Carson's stage on The Tonight Show went out, the studio did not go back to its normal noise right away. There was still something in the air. Something fragile that is hard to describe. The crew moved carefully and almost quietly, as if they knew right away that what had just happened under the bright lights wasn't just a show. It had felt more personal, like something that wasn't planned and was very human. For a moment longer than normal, Johnny Carson stayed at his desk and stared at the empty chair where Elvis Presley had been sitting. Johnny had hosted a huge number of talks. He knew when a guest was on edge, when someone was practicing, and when a story was being blown up to make people laugh. However, what he saw that night was neither a show nor a marketing stunt. It was clear that they were tired, and their honesty was getting lost in the cracks of their carefully built success. Johnny finally got up and walked backstage. There was a small hallway behind the set that was lined with framed pictures of past guests. Famous people frozen in funny faces. It felt like the walls were almost funny now. Fame caught in a beautiful still image. Fame kept and fame framed. What was even stranger was the real person behind the fame. The door to Elvis's changing room was just a bit open. Johnny gave it a light knock before going inside. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the electric lights. Elvis was sitting in front of the mirror with his jacket folded up next to him, without the crowd, without the